You're listening to Coast Business Radio with Mike Ryan.
Freeman's organic farm grew high-quality tropical fruits such as avocados, custard apples, mangoes, pawpaws, and of course, award-winning bananas. Today, however, Freeman's organic farm have expanded their produce and grow a large range of organic fruits, vegetables, and herbs. David Freeman is a fourth-generation farmer, international human rights barrister, retired Lieutenant Colonel, board member of Soil Care Australia, patron of Currumbin RSL, and Skal International Southern Gold Coast president. David, have I left anything out?
No, that's pretty well it, Mike. You're too generous with that intro, mate, so thank you.
And also jumps out of aeroplanes, or used to.
Yes, I did do a bit of that, yes. Yes, I've got my military wings, so the joke was they called me paralegal.
I love it. Okay, tell us about Freeman's Farm and how you've been affected by the recent events.
Yeah, Michael, it's been interesting because last year we had, as everybody will know, 6 months is a short time when you have something like COVID-19. But people might remember back to October and November there were bushfires, which, whilst it didn't affect us, they were in Binnaburra at the end of our valley. But we had the driest year in 100 years. So for the first time in our history, Currumbin Creek stopped flowing and our spring, both my dams actually ran dry. So we had to buy in water just to keep the vegetables alive. I couldn't expand any production, but we got through that. And then, of course, we had very heavy monsoonal rain in February. And then March and now April, we've got a thing called COVID-19. So it's affected tourism and small businesses. And I guess the interesting bit for us is that I didn't know how it would affect us, but it's actually, whilst we can only do takeaway food at the cafe, and our cafe has dropped right off like all cafes, our sales on our organic produce has gone up nearly 300%. And the three reasons I give for that, Mike, is that I think because of social distancing, a number of the big farmers' markets have had to close, like Bundle, and, that was a huge market, so people are coming all the way down from the northern Gold Coast to shop at our place. Secondly, the supermarkets, which we've all seen panic buying, there's very little organic produce on their shelves. And thirdly, I guess because of the illness, everybody's trying to build their immunity, and they know if they come to our farm where there's obviously 150 acres, there's plenty of space and fresh air. So it's become a bit of a refuge where people come up to, get their fruit and veg, and they sit under the mango tree and meditate for a while. So it's had the converse effect with sales of fruit and veg to a lot of small businesses.
Put me on the right track here. Is it better or not better?
Oh no, there's unequivocal research that organic fruit and vegetables is much more nutrient dense than either hydroponic or chemically grown, what we call conventionally grown produce. I'll give you a quick case study, and that research has been done by also in our backyard, Southern Cross University, which have set up the first centre for organics at Lismore campus. And they're actually offering a degree which started this year called Bachelor of Science in Regenerative Agriculture, which I'm going to enrol in next year with a mate. And it goes into a lot of the benefits or the nutrient density of fruit and vegetables. The reason is that when your soil is in, organic farmers like myself are obsessed about the soil, and we get it minerally balanced, so it's got the perfect pH of 7 and the correct ratio of calcium to magnesium, phosphorus and potassium and all the trace elements. But then what we do, we add enormous amounts of compost or mulch to get the biological activity. So the biological activity then in your soil activates and makes all those minerals available to the plant, so it can reach its optimum growth and give you the optimum nutrient density. The case study is that when you go into the supermarket, you see a beautiful looking lettuce in the cellophane that's been grown hydroponically, which your listeners would know means simply in a PVC tube with artificial cotton wool and artificial nitrates, soluble chemicals being flushed down that pipe. So it gets very rapid growth, and people can grow, enormous volumes in a small area. The trouble is the Brix, BRIX, that's a measure of nutrient density. That lettuce has been researched and tested at about 1.5 on the Brix meter. The organic lettuce that I grow and other organic farmers have been measured at Southern Cross University as well, and our lettuce measure 20 on the bricks metre.
That's
so
amazing.
There is your difference in nutrient density between non-organic produce and an organically grown vegetable. And the same is across the range with every fruit and veg between conventional. So a conventional vegetable might measure 4 or 6 on the bricks, whereas an organic vegetable will measure somewhere between 12 and 20 if it's grown organically.
Have you always been organic?
Up until World War II, we were organic because there were none of these modern agricultural chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
What's called post-World War II and into the 50s, it's what was called the Green Revolution, where, you know, the leading agronomists in universities all perpetuated this use of heavy nitrate fertilisers, and with that came the other raft of then chemicals by the big agricultural chemical companies that farmers could use to stop the bugs and do all the rest of it. We were lazy farmers, as I like to say it, and we didn't like using chemicals, so we only used herbicide just to keep the grass and weeds down amongst the fruit trees. We didn't ever use insecticides, pesticides or fungicides. But when I retired from the Army 7 years ago, I had a mission to go wholly organic, and I studied organic farming at Wallingbar TAFE, and so for the last 7 years we've been thoroughly organic.
As a business model, from a regular farm that's non-organic compared to a organic farm, what's the major difference?
Well, the business model is that you've got to have that mindset that you want to be an organic farmer, because you need much more meticulous planning. Mm-hmm. You just can't solve your pest problems by going, you've got to have companion planting, biological controls with other insects. You have to design your system so that you don't have the weed and grass competition, and that means, putting down organic weed gunnel, and also around your trees instead of spraying, you have to dig back to bare earth and mulch very heavily to suppress the weeds, and also so the organic farming model is that you will never get the turnover and the rates of production because you can't do the same volume of areas as a conventional farmer, but you obviously believe in what you're growing and you can get a better return on your produce. Mind you, there is a much bigger labour input in the organic farming model. Because
of the bushfires, the drought, not so much the coronavirus for this regard, but the planning. I mean, you can't really. I mean, I'm from a farm myself, so there's a lot of thought, and it just doesn't happen the next day. You got to really put in a lot of planning, and hope that the weather gods are good to you. Now, you had a drought. You said the Currumbin Creek dried up. Then you had the bushfires. Even though they didn't burn your farm down, you still had the smoke, which of course permeates. So how do you plan around that? I mean, they're headaches that basically people don't need. Do you think maybe your heritage with your family, and two, the military training might have helped? Yeah, I do. It's a very good question. Most, accountants, if you're a farmer, they'll just say you're mad. And the joke is that, my accountant says to me, David, how do you make your first $1 million out of farming? And I'll look at him quizzically because I know there's a hook or there's a joke in this. And he says you start with $2 million because you guarantee that you'll just lose money. It's called the perpetual black hole. But we love doing it. We're intergenerational. I believe in growing high-quality, nutrient-dense organic produce for my community, even though I don't make a cent out of it. I hope to make a cent, but meaning is that I think it's a worthy and noble cause. Mm-hmm. And, I've inherited, I say this very sincerely to all the school kids that come up on farms, to say that my duty and my role is to return this land in a better state than I found it, so that our farm can go on for another 1,000 years. So I'm regenerating the soil. And, I suppose to that end, I've had the former Governor-General, Major General Mike Jeffrey, come up, who heads up Soils for Life Australia, and he'd heard about the work I was doing with soil regeneration and regenerating the soil into 300 avocado trees and making a thing called ramial wood chip, which is only found in the rainforests. Mm-hmm. And by putting that around the avocados, which are actually indigenous to the rainforest from Central America, I've been able to regrow old avocado trees that were dead Oh, really?
And I've been able to do that through just completely natural means. No chemicals or no organic chemicals. They have come back to life from a dead tree and are now producing up to 500 fruit just through simply regenerating the soil,
Wow.
getting soil minerals right and getting that organic matter back into the soil. So that's exciting stuff.
My dad always, because he grew avocados, he ripped out the oranges and mandarins and lemons and stuff, planted the avocados, and he said, these are our money trees. And
Yes.
he was right, but I think he didn't realise they were money trees, but it was money going out trees.
Yeah. Well, you've got to wait 7 years until you break even with any, fruit tree, Michael. So it's a long wait. But so back to your original question, the military training or the family heritage. Yeah, I mean, if you look at my father and grandfather and great-great-uncle, my father's a fighter pilot, and so he's a bloke that doesn't give in easily. Mm-hmm. And he's been there since World War II. And, he taught us stamina, resistance and determination, and I guess it's been inbred to us. And so even though when the drought was on and Tom Forbes from ABC interviewed me, he asked me the question right at the end of the interview, and he said, mate, what happens if it doesn't rain? And for the first time in my life, I said, you know what, Tom? I might have to pack it in. Oh. And so I feel sorry for those Western farmers who are in drought because you buy in feed and you chase it, to keep your stock alive, hoping that, the rains will come. But there comes a certain point economically where you just cannot keep spending money if you don't have any income. But we were lucky. We went about, 6 months with drought, and then, on Christmas Eve when we went to church, the rain started falling out of the sky and it hasn't stopped.
So he was listening, wasn't he?
He was, mate.
Yeah, that's
you
good.
just got to ride out these storms. You've got to, what it's taught me, we're going to actually increase our water harvest ability. We were just relying on surface dams and our natural spring, which had never dried up. But I'm going to, with obviously some government assistance, build some big, huge tanks to actually harvest all our water off roofs. So even when my earth dams dry up, I will still have, 250,000 litres of water, which would keep keep things going for a couple of months until the rains come. So you just got to be patient, you got to believe in it, and eventually the weather will change.
Okay, now you're very passionate about the land and your farm.
Yes.
What should Australians then be doing about their prime farming enterprises? Should they be selling off the farm, for example, to the Chinese?
That's a political question. I think we need to keep our food security.
Yep.
And, our wonderful agricultural lands. There's more percentage of under acreage that are organic farms than any other country on earth. I think why farmers are selling off to foreign investment is simply because farmers don't get enough return. I think what people and the Australian government or policies could do is actually reward our farmers a little more, like every other Western economy where farmers are subsidised. Australian farmers are not. We don't even get a subsidy on our diesel. So if and farmers work damn hard, so, if the governments and policies and our Australian public were prepared to pay a little more for their produce, you'd keep farmers on the land, they wouldn't sell their farms. So that's the way I'd solve the problem, selling off to foreign interests, overseas interests.
Having grown on the land myself, I know that when we used to pack the oranges, we used, you give the supermarkets the perfect ones. We had the sizer there and all that sort of stuff. I was mildly impressed with Coles, and I never thought I would ever say that. But when the drought was before the coronavirus kicked in, they were then starting to sell the produce that wasn't perfect. And they said, this is straight from the farmer, and we're going to do our bit more for the farmer. And that was really nice. But you sort of think, well, why didn't they do that earlier? Why don't supermarkets and stuff look after the farmers early? Because if you've got a Chinese business says, I'm going to give you double what your property's worth, and you're thinking, I'm in the middle of a drought, I've got a few more years of this, it's going to be hard, I've got to get the money back just in time for the next cycle to hit. So you're right, the government does need to look after the farmer, but you wonder why the supermarkets didn't put that in place years and years ago.
Well, you and 25 million other Australians, Michael, the desperation in my voice is that the supermarkets do not treat the farmers well, and the parlour state of what they did to the dairy farmers is bordering on, I'll be careful with my words. No, I'll just go straight disgraceful. How they treated the dairy farmers, screwing them down to $1 a litre when the production costs of producing a litre of milk is about $1.25 just to have a milk war, was also forced 1,000 fifth-generation dairy farmers off the land. So,
So the question then is, the Chinese, then, if the farmer is being screwed so bad, then the Chinese are saying, well, this is almost too easy because the farmer just can't exist. And what happens is that all our farm to plate, it's actually not going to our plates, it's going to overseas plates. And now we're starting to find ourselves in a spot of bother.
Look, if it continued unchecked, yes. But at the moment, we're able to produce enough food for 75 million people. So we're able to feed our country and more. So I think there has to be, this current government is serious about appreciating that our agricultural lands are a strategic interest, and that's why Scott Morrison has had chats with Major General Mike Jeffrey and given Source for Life $2 million to actually to start educating and planning conventional farmers and other people about regenerating our soils, because some of our best agricultural lands on the Darling Downs and other places over 100 years of continuous farming, those soils are degraded. And so the new generation of farmers, hopefully, and ones like me, understand the importance of soil regeneration, getting the carbon back into the soil and any humus. Because as Major General Jeffrey would tell you, is that once you've got carbon in the soil, it holds 8 times the volume of water than soil without humus and carbon. So that also drought-proofs your land. And so when I had my drought last year, because I'd mulched all my avocado trees with, about 12 inches of beautiful ramule wood chip, is that 3 months into the drought, I scratched underneath and the soil was still wet. And I didn't lose one avocado tree, nor did I lose any crop, because I'd effectively drought-proofed my trees by having all that carbon in the soil.
Just moving to tourism, being the president of the Skal International Southern Gold Coast chapter. Tourism whacked around the head is absolutely disastrous. Where do you see the future? How do we protect ourselves?
Well, something as disastrous as this, Mike, I don't think we can, mate. This has been inflicted on it. It's grown. Every day is different. Our tourism's suffering because we simply can't take the risk medically to allow people coming in on overseas aeroplanes, because that's where the majority of the diseases come from. So until we get it under control, it will affect tourism, because our tourism is really driven by, the overseas market, especially the Asian market. Perhaps what they've got to do, and I think a lot of businesses are reviewing their own, sort of not all eggs in one basket, because those those tourist companies that I ran into at Surface that only had Chinese or Japanese tourists, well, as soon as COVID-19, they had to fold their doors. They went from 100% to 1%. So, I think people have to broaden their base, make sure that they've got that domestic market strong, so they can still get through the hard times just with the domestic market and maybe New Zealand. But if you put all your eggs in one basket in any business and that other party you're contracting with goes under or can't come, well, you're in strife. So it's very tough for our tourist operators, mate. There's no solution, and there's only until they can lift the restrictions of travel that they can have people flying into the country and take them on whatever, or accommodation houses or bus tours or yacht tours. We've just got to get our COVID-19 under control, and then people will start coming back and holidaying on the Gold Coast, which is one of the great destinations in the world.
Okay, two things. Somebody wants to find out about Freeman's organic farm. First of all, how do they do that?
Very simply, if they just Google, go onto a web, just Google Freeman's Organic Farm. I think we come up pretty high on the SEO, and it's on Facebook and Instagram. Otherwise, it's a beautiful drive up Currumbin Valley, and you go up to the turn-off that says Moorlambar Tommelin, and there's a big yellow sign that says Freeman's Organic Farm, 6 kilometres. And there's a lovely lookout up there. You can see the ocean, you can see the mountains, and the produce is all laid out. And there's a nice little cafe with organic coffee and food that's now takeaway. But when the virus goes away, we'll be back to sit down and people can sit there and enjoy the majesty of nature.
And secondly, though, if you're a business that's involved in tourism and you're on the southern Gold Coast, suggestion would be to become involved with Skal. How do they do that?
They can ring me, obviously, or Peter Doggett, who's my very capable secretary, more capable than me.
He's very good.
There's a Skal web page. We have a Skal International Southern Gold Coast web page, and I haven't looked it up recently, but I think all our contacts, all the executives' contacts are on that web page.
Mm-hmm.
When we return to normal, we have a monthly meeting every Tuesday at the Currumbin RSL, but of course that's all on hold until this virus. But we do hold about 4 social functions a year. We have a wine tasting night at Nirvana by the Sea. We have a tour of our farm. I think we're doing Husk Distillery. We're allowed to go back there, and also we have what's called we don't use the word car rally, we call it car navigation and adventure.
Hopefully you won't be in the same car as your PA, Peter Doggett, because you never know where you'll end up after a few drinks at Husk. I mean, it could be anywhere.
Very well put.
Thank you, sir. Now, by the way, the website, if you want to find out more about Skal, is southerngoldcoast.skal.org.au. How's that? Research department working overtime.
Michael, you're so clever, mate. I'm sitting out looking at Tallabudger Creek, so I didn't have a computer handy.
David Freeman, Lieutenant Colonel David Freeman extraordinaire. Thank you very much for your time.